This is the first book I've ever read by Patricia Highsmith, and I did enjoy it. I mean, I've read it over a few months really. I'm just going to look at my notes as I go along. This turned out to be the second in a series of 5 books, which people who are fans of Patricia Highsmith will obviously know that there's a series of them. I'd heard of the film, The Talented Mr. Ripley with Matt Damon, I think, and Jude Law, I think, was in it. I haven't seen the film. I think I've seen a few clips. But I know people are fans of the series when I've mentioned this elsewhere, fans of the books. I'd seen some quotes by Patricia Highsmith, and I don't know whether they were from the novels or from letters or from interviews. And I thought, oh, she sounds interesting. So I thought I'd give this book a go, and it happened to turn up in a bookshelf where you can leave donations in the town where I live. So I started reading it, and it starts off in France, where Tom Ripley is living. His wife's in Greece at the time. There's a lady who's his housekeeper, Madame Annette. I accidentally stopped the video there. So anyway, that's the book. It's got a cover of some like trees and mist, a bit mysterious and dark. So I started reading this, when was it, like 22nd of February, so I just recently finished it when I was away. There's a connection with the art world here. That's one of the main themes of this book. It's about art forgery. I don't want to give away any of the main plot points, really, to spoil. I don't want to give any spoilers away, so I'm going to be careful not to do that. The book that I'd read before the book that I read before this was by Rosamund Pilcher, and that was a book called Another View. I really enjoyed that, but that was very different. It wasn't a crime book. It was more of a sort of kind of a mixture of romance, but with just sort of talking about people's lives, really. But that was, weirdly, that started off in France as well, and then moved to London and then to Cornwall. But it was also to do with the art world and people with a gallery, and the whole art world came into that, and the world of theatricality as well, of theatre. And in a way, there's a kind of theatre in this book as well, not the actual theatre, but of people pretending to be people who they are not, and putting on disguises. And I don't want to say too much about that. So I'll just go through some of the notes I made en route about this book. I think there's a really nice style of it. It's kind of easy reading, I found. You know, it's not overly written. It's not too literary in that sense. You know, you can read it. It flows really nicely. And I read really slowly these days, so I just would read a few pages a day, generally speaking. You get a sense of where you are very much in this house in France. It's obviously a nice house with extensive grounds, a nice garden. It opens with Tom Ripley doing some gardening, basically. So I don't know anything about this character. I've not seen the films, and I've not read any of the other books. I know this is the second in the series now, so obviously he's been presented before by the author. So, although I'm just going to pick out some little phrases that I found of interest all through it. Page 24 in this, there's a line which says, "As usual, another person's nervousness was making Tom feel calm." When I begin to learn what kind of person Tom is, because I'm not familiar with the character, I think that's an interesting idea, that another person's nervousness makes him feel calm, that he goes to the other polarity, as it were. Then page 30, it says, "Through the closed door that led to the gallery came a hubbub of voices." Tom has gone over to London to this gallery now. "Lots of voices, out of which a woman's laugh leapt like a porpoise over the surface of a troubled sea," Tom thought, though he was not in the mood for poetry now. So I thought that was a really nicely written line, but it also says something about Tom, that he's got this these various sensibilities that he can appreciate: art and poetry, fine dining and nice hotels and nice clothes. He's a bit of an aesthete. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. He likes the finer things. He likes beauty. There's a little scene later where Tom Ripley gives cigarettes to a sandwich board man who's like obviously down on his luck, who's just got this end of a fag in his mouth and obviously hasn't got much money and everything like that. So Tom gives this kind of random act of kindness that he gives this sandwich board man, and then he moves away quickly, Tom does, hoping that no one had seen him. And that might be for the reasons of what he's about to do, but I thought at the time, is it because he doesn't want to be seen to be being kind to people? I'm not sure, but it was interesting anyway. There's a bit here where it says Tom was fascinated by fire. He loved fires. And the quote that I picked out is he felt he had to watch them constantly. So once a fire's going, it draws him in. I think that says something else about the type of person he is. So trying not to give away any bits of the plot, Tom is visited by this Italian count character, and there's a line where it says, Tom tried to pay attention to the count because the count's yapping away, and to exclude the music. He's put on some classical music, but Tom always found it hard to exclude music. So a bit like the fire, it seems as though once he's fixated on something, fire, music, something very powerful that can draw him in, it's hard for him to split his attention. He's like hypnotized by it or captivated by it. I did start to watch an interview with Patricia Highsmith. Sorry, that's the writer, Patricia Highsmith, but Patricia Cornwall's another writer, obviously. And she started, I didn't watch too much of it because I didn't want it to give away anything that I might find out in the novels, and I'm a bit ambivalent about finding out too much about writers, but I might go back to the interview because she sounded a very interesting person. I'd read a little bit about her and found something quite curious, that she collected snails, she had snails as pets. I'm assuming they're larger snails, I don't know, and that she tried to, when she moved over to France, she sort of smuggled them over in a yogurt pot or something like that. So she had these snails. So she's, some people might think that slightly eccentric anyway, but that she's a bit like that. But in this interview, she does acknowledge that she believes Tom Ripley is a psychopath. She makes no bones about it. That's what she says. That she goes, yeah, well, kind of from memory now, she kind of goes, yeah, well, yeah, he's obviously a psychopath. I think she's asked by the interviewer, would you say that Tom Ripley's a psychopath? And she goes, well, yeah, that type of thing. But she finds him interesting, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't sustain a character over 5 books if you didn't find him interesting as a writer yourself. There's a bit here where I'm not sure I'll talk about this because it will give away a plot point, so yeah, I won't talk about that. There's an American guy comes over that Tom that creates a problem for this forgery that's been going on, but I won't say anything further there, so I don't want to give any major plot points of the story. There's this kind of subplot or sub little job that Tom Ripley does, like dealing with like microfilm hidden in tubes of toothpaste. So it's a bit sort of, there's something, and this leads me to something general about the book, is there's a kind of farcical element about it. It's a bit pushed. Yes, it's kind of possible, but it's sort of humorous in the way that it's sort of a little bit pushed about what kind of things somebody could be involved in. An element of farce in a way, but a dark farce, and the idea that there's all these international machinations going on and he's part of some of them and plays a little role working for other people in other countries that are transporting documents or microfilm across, and he plays a part as a staging point in that, and obviously gets money for it. Oh yeah, I just see my note here now on the computer. There's an element of farce, of dark farce, of things conspiring to draw him in to committing acts of violence. This is Tom now. Not that he plans to do it for any sadistic reason. Not in this book anyway. I don't know what he does in the other books. It's not as though he's doing it for pleasure, this violence. It's to do with the pragmatic needs to keep him in the position, the life he's become accustomed to. So it just as a function to commit these acts of violence in a functional way to protect his and other people's interests. So I'm not going to go into what they were and what they are. So I won't say this next note. There's this idea of this, the forgeries are being done because this isn't giving anything away because it's sort of stated right at the beginning. There's an artist who's supposed to be alive, but he's actually dead, and they've got another artist forging this person's paintings as though they're still alive. There's the whole backstory with the original artist anyway. He's said to be in Mexico, but there's another artist doing these because it's become very lucrative, and it's created these spin-off industries of art materials and sort of an art course in Italy. So it's become quite a business concern. So there's a lot to protect, both for Tom Ripley and his other associates. There's a chap called Bernard. He's the guy that's forging the art, and it's a real problem for him to do it because he's really going against all his feelings really as an artist himself, and he's losing himself. He's lost himself as an artist. He's become someone who just kind of copies someone else's style. Yeah, I won't talk about this. I've got all these notes here that I made through, but if I talk about it, it will give away too much of a plot. But I'll talk in more general terms. Tom can think, I think, deep or analytic or empathetic thoughts. He can think these thoughts to a degree, almost like he performs thinking of them, or he goes to a certain level of depth, while at the same time having no conscience about committing extreme violence, the most extreme violence you can think of, and sees it merely as a practical task. This is a note I've written. It's not kind of personal in that sense, you know. There's some anger there towards some people if they frustrate his position or appear to be a threat to his interest and other people's interests, as Tom sees it. But then thereafter, there is no conscience, but there is so there are these ordinary feelings mixed with hideous acts, really, and the crimes committed almost become ordinary and functional. That's how they seem to me, and then they just become a problem to then deal with, to get past. His interactions with the police, you know, Tom is incredibly cool, and Patricia Highsmith is piling the pressure on him more and more and more, which is obviously a really good technique as a writer, because you're thinking as a reader, how's he going to get out of this? But he's incredibly cool under pressure, is Tom. But then Tom Ripley, but he has moments where he's obviously worrying and he's trying to figure this out, but it's almost as though the harder it gets, the more of a challenge there is to get out of something, the more resources he's got to bring to it, the more cooler he is, the more quick thinking he is. He seems to thrive in that. I made a note here. Tom's very accommodating and sociable. He seems to have many people wanting his time, people visiting him, asking him to visit them. He's ostensibly, he's kind to his servant, the housekeeper, Madame Annette. She's a nice character. I liked her. He's sort of superficially thoughtful. He buys little presents, and for his wife, Eloise. He's got friends locally, neighbours that invite him and Eloise around for drinks and little parties. So he's a sociable guy, and he's kind of seen as someone that's interesting, and he's got this charm. I thought it was interesting he studies languages. That's interesting as well. Obviously, they're useful for him. Very cool under pressure, but he does have nerves. He's not like without nerves at all. He does get upset. He gets worried and stressed, but he manages those nerves. He does care but he knows, he believes in himself and believes that he can handle these stresses. There's a certain amount of impulsiveness, because when he commits a certain crime in the book, he hasn't really planned exactly what to do later. He's very in the moment in that sense, because he's got a problem then, and he's going to have to deal with that, and he hasn't made plans for it. So that creates further problems, one after the other. There's an interesting thing here where there's a storm building. This is back in France now. There's a storm building outside, and it says, Tom's nervous of the wind. He feels great tension. The wind and the storm building make him agitated. He's got a strange relationship with Heloise. You know, I wondered if it is a kind of a marriage of convenience for him. I'll read a little bit, which is not so much about the plot, but about his feelings about Heloise. I don't know if you pronounce it Eloise or Heloise. Maybe it's Eloise, but it's with an H. But I'll read a little bit about his view of her as a selection from the book later. What have I put here? The wedding, the feelings at the wedding, they kind of did it with nobody there, hardly, in a sort of perfunctory way. The father probably was a bit against it, I get the sense. I haven't read the first book. Maybe that comes up there. The first book being The Talented Mr. Ripley. So this book's written in 1970, and the first book is Talented Mr. Ripley, the first in the series. I don't know whether Patricia Highsmith knew she was going to be writing a series, possibly not, because that was in 1955, so there's a 15-year gap. I'll talk about the series at the end as a whole, just in a generality. Page 110 in this book, which is published by Vintage. Right, yeah. So when he's dealing with Bernard, this artist who's involved in the forging, and Bernard is having a breakdown, there's this idea that there's a quote here. Tom nodded, strangely shaken as he always was when in the presence of someone genuinely a bit off in the head. So it's like the idea that, you know, is this psychopath Tom Ripley, is he mad? But when he meets someone who's breaking down very, very overtly, that shakes him. That kind of signs of madness really unnerve Tom Ripley. So it says he's shaken in the presence of someone who is like breaking down. Throughout the book, there's a lot to do with letters. It got obviously pre-internet, pre-mobile phone, but phone calls, difficulty of phone calls from France, because apparently the phone system isn't great, not being able to understand people, waiting a half an hour for phone calls to be put through via operators. But there's a lot all the way through it: letters, phone calls, telegrams, newspapers, looking for newspaper reports, meetings at stations, all this kind of thing that runs through it like a spine. I haven't seen the series Dexter, but I'm aware it's about a serial killer, psychopath, I guess. I don't know if that's but that's obviously someone that's taken as someone who he isn't and seen as charming. Another person came to mind was the one in Silence of the Lambs. I've forgotten his name for a moment, I've written it further down here. But someone who enjoys the finer things of life that Tom Ripley likes to as well, but he's obviously a psychiatrist in Silent. Hannibal Lecter, Dr. Hannibal Lecter. But someone who's has pretensions, and well, maybe they're not pretensions, but he likes art, he likes fine food, wine, good living, so-called. And there's sort of a correlation there between that and Tom Ripley. So I thought that was an interesting, I'm presuming, yeah, I'm sure that character was created later. They're not the same, of course, because one's a psychiatrist and Tom is sort of something else, isn't he? So Patricia Highsmith puts more and more pressure on Tom, and it's just crazy. It becomes funny. It's kind of semi-humorous. It's humorous, but in a dark way. As I say, yeah, there's a bit of a repetition, but there's a kind of farcical element to the stress of dealing with what he's done. I got this thing where he laughs. He even laughs out of the stress after doing something terrible, but achieving a way to kind of hide it. there's a relief for him, and there's a kind of satisfaction, a kind of laugh of triumph. He's got it. It's like he's juggling. This is Tom now, juggling, keeping plates in the air. It does affect him, but he manages to do it, keep one step ahead of people who are investigating him and trying to uncover what he's done or may have done, because they don't actually know. I'm talking about the police. He performs all the tasks that are needed. He cleans everything up. He's very good in terms of, I mean, nowadays it would be different with DNA and stuff, but he's good at getting away. He's good at dealing with evidence, cleaning up scenes, is Tom. And also moving people off and on stage, people that are visiting him that might know too much. He's got to get rid of them before someone else comes. So he's got to be dealing with personas and people and where they are. Are they visiting him, or do he need to get rid of them, or not allow the police to meet another person, or this sort of thing. This is all this sort of plate spinning that he's doing. And he pulls people in when he needs to compromise them, you know, when he needs to do that. But he's wary about who he tells what. But when he needs to, he'll compromise them and pulls them in. But I get the sense he'd rather work alone because he's safer that way. The more people know about what he does, the more threatened he potentially is. Page 124 here. So it's not a hugely long book, but he says of Heloise, Tom says, he wanted very much to see her. This is a quote. He wanted very much to see her. He had grown used to her and he missed her. Was that loving someone or marriage? So it's the idea about, you know, does he feel real, quote unquote, real emotions? But he has that sense of missing someone. I mean, she's useful to him, obviously. The reason he's in that big house is because of her wealth, really, ostensibly, the father's wealth. And he's a businessman, isn't it? Something to do with pharmaceuticals, I believe. The Plisson family, I think, from memory. The English police officer from the Metropolitan Police, I like him. He's a good character. He feels a little bit of the classic age of detective fiction, a sort of an Agatha Christie sort of character, a wry sort of character that's smiling and laughing a lot. Smiling, he's got these kind of big teeth, apparently, like a rabbit. But he feels like a threat. Tom recognises he's a threat, but he's obviously an efficient police officer, and and that happens halfway through the book. So that's an interesting thing. So the police aren't really, I mean, there's some French police that turn up, but it's really the British police officer that is more of a threat to Tom and the other people involved in this forgery and crimes that lead from the forgery. I was thinking now in terms of the themes of the story, it's a sense of fakery, appearing to be what one is not, both in the paintings, both forging paintings, and that people become forgeries of themselves. Ripley's persona is essentially a forgery, or is it in certain circumstances? That's the question. But he's having to pretend to be other people in certain instances. I won't go too far into that to give anything away, but he's literally having to pretend to be other people, and he's often doing that. And I get a sense that he is in the other books, not that I've read them, but he's having to be a shapeshifter. But also the world wants to accept certain forgeries. That art world, if there's money involved with it, you can find people to accept the forgeries as long as you can keep the grift going. You know, the world at large will accept it as long as they aren't shown to know that they know they're forgeries. You can make money out of forgeries, and obviously you can make money and have power over people by pretending to be someone you're not, and getting up to all kinds of shenanigans like that. You can trick people, as I've written here, with persona as much as you can trick them with another kind of forgery, i.e. the forgery of an item of art, a painting, a work of art. The need to commit forgery, misdirection and fraud for gain. Yeah, I mean, Ripley's forgery of himself, of representing himself as someone or something he is not, is purely for gain, and it's done for pragmatic reasons, to keep him in the the life that he's become accustomed to. Ripley has no conscience in big matters, I wrote, but sometimes he has fleeting emotions of regret or empathy, like for this sandwich board man who gives this cigarette, or for Bernard, the put-upon artist who's been sort of inveigled into going against his artistic sensibilities and his truth and becoming a forger. I mean, this Bernard guy doesn't really accept a lot of money at all, so it's not really the money for him, but he's sort of stuck in the role now, and it's breaking him down, you know. Ripley's an artist himself. He does paintings, but then he's doing a painting of Madame Annette, but he realises he's doing it in the style of de Kooning, without a painter called de Kooning, without necessarily being planned to do that, but he realises he's copying someone else. I had a sense then that he knows he can't be original, and that's his limitation, that there's something about him that isn't original but can piggyback off other people, look at the way they act, pretend to be like them, but who is he when you strip all that away? Even in his paintings, he's copying someone else and can't seem to help that. Bernard is an interesting character as this artist. He's breaking down, as I say, and he wants the work. He wants to see if the world can love and want him as the artist that he is, his own art, and value him for that. And that's the struggle he's dealing with. He mentions his own work has become completely stuck. It's hit a brick wall ever since he's doing these forgeries. Inspector Webster is the name of the British police officer. Who's a bit of a he's not a stereotype, but he's a kind of classic character, it seems, out of detective fiction. He's amusing and amused. He's smiling. He's kind of got this lightness. He's got a lot of intuition, and I was just looking at where it's set. This French village, Villeperse is a made-up village apparently, but Milan is real, I think. There's some nice references to old kind of drinks. Dubonnet. I think you can still get Dubonnet, but it was obviously more popular in the 70s in France. Webster has a glass of that. He's offered that when he comes to the house, which is called Belle Ombre, which I think means beautiful shadow. That's the name of Tom Ripley's and Eloise's house. Belle Ombre, beautiful shadow, which there's a bit of a hint there about the shadow life, the shadow self, maybe. I've got a bit to read, and perhaps I'll do that at the end, which is a little bit about Tom Ripley's view of his wife. There's a little bit I'll read there. This video is getting quite long. I didn't realise. Hope it's not too long. I thought it was going to be quite short. Tom's fear and nervousness in the face of Bernard's actual madness. That's a bit of a thing that we talked about before. And I put here, there's perhaps what a reason for that might be, because the genuinely mad, as it were, can't be manipulated or controlled by others, because there's kind of clarity, and they're seeing through everything, and that they won't be manipulated as easily. Quote unquote mad. The breakdown is the idea of the breakdown being a breakthrough, and that someone that is quote unquote mad won't be as easily manipulated because they're very suspicious and they're seeing other people's lies, actually, so that they'd be more likely to be suspicious of someone called Tom. There's a kind of, he's always thinking ahead, really. There's a note that Bernard writes, page 152, Tom Ripley keeps this note, and he says he might need it, who knew? So it's like he's instinctive. Tom Ripley is very instinctive about what might become useful in the future, so he keeps this note that Bernard wrote. I like this part here, when Tom's doing something that he shouldn't be doing. He says, Tom did not look back at the house because he believed one person's eye attracted the eye of another. It's that idea that we're working kind of energetically, and the idea that a focus on someone else will draw someone else's eye. So he's got these instinctive, he's kind of an animal-like cunning and awareness, that the view, the look at something has got a power to it. Both other people's looking at him. other people looking at him and him looking at other people, and people drawing attention, as it were. I won't go into who does it, but when Tom is physically attacked, he's very cool afterward, just lights a cigarette, and he's in bare feet. It's extraordinary. And also very cool with the police. He's always offering people drinks to the police, both the French police and the British police, wine and beer and little sandwiches. So he's like a great host in a way, is Tom. Bernard's breakdown is an interesting through line, really, what's happening there, and it really draws the plot forward, and what the threat of that to the whole enterprise. I won't say too much about it. But there's this idea, really, that once you've moved far away from who you actually are and presenting yourself to the world in a way that isn't you, once you've forged yourself, and that being the kind of analogy with forging paintings, once you become someone you're not, you lose yourself, both in life, but also in art, if you're an artist. But even if you're not an artist, you lose yourself in life once you've presented yourself for too long as somebody, something you're not. And with Bernard, in a particular case, because there's an unrequited love there, or a relationship that's broken up, and there's a sense that because Bernard's not been true to himself, he's lost the woman he loves, and can't get back to that, because he's no longer genuine, because he's creating false things, so he can't be loved for who he is, even in a romantic sense. Page 172, there's something about music here, and it relates to Tom Ripley, that, quote, "The jazz did nothing for him," him being Tom Ripley, "the jazz did nothing for him, only classical music did something. It soothed or it bored, gave confidence or took confidence quite away, because it had order, and one either accepted that order or rejected it." I thought that was an interesting line. There's a set. I always wondered, what did it mean, Ripley Under Ground? You definitely get to find out why it's called that. I'm not going to say any more. Besides being in France, this idea of savoir-faire, coolness, especially under pressure. Tom has this in spades. He even finds the most perilous situations amusing and funny. Both, he gets very nervous, but he also then finds it funny, flips very quickly. But he does feel fear and apprehension. He feels anger and concern and stress. I mentioned this Tom's house called Belle Ombre, beautiful shadow. As I thought of it, as I said, the shadow self, or that the shadow is what people see, the shadow occluding the real Tom Ripley. Conversely, the way he's projecting himself is really a shadow, is a thin thing that just surface, but the real, figuratively, the shadow is hiding the real him. I thought this was an interesting line, page 177 in this book. Circles annoyed him. This is Tom. Circles annoyed him. Tom preferred to think in terms of squares or rectangles. That was interesting. There's a saying about nature there's no straight lines in nature. And this idea about circles and the kind of purity of them, or the symbolism of them. But he prefers squares or rectangles. I suppose like blocks, sort of. That's interesting. I thought that says something about his character. Again, he's injured at one point, Tom, and he's like fainting in the hotel, but then it flips and he's drinking champagne the next thing with Eloise in a hotel. Hotels keep coming up all the time throughout this. He's always bouncing back, as though everything can be sorted or controlled. And that's what keeps you as a reader, kept me anyway, going through it. Like, how's he going to get out of this? And he does manage it. He keeps rising up like a phoenix, or literally. There's a farcical nature of all this. The intensity makes it farcical. There's never a rest from more and more pressure being put on him. And yet throughout all this, there's all these meals and wines and little jaunts out along a river and stuff like that. Telephones, as I said before, you get this situation where apparently because of in 1970s, the French telephone system is not meant to be good, according to the book. I think Patricia Highsmith lived in France. That's why it's so detailed and obviously feels realistic. She lived there for some time. I don't know how long. Haven't looked that up. But it takes ages to get a telephone to be put through. But also in London as well, in hotels, like half an hour, 40 minutes. Telephones are unreliable, you know. You can't hear often. Right, and you know, there's new passports and false names he starts adopting. Page 181, Tom says, Eloise, you're the only woman in the world who has ever made me think of now, end quote. You're the only woman in the world who's ever made me think of now. Maybe she sort of represents someone that could potentially get him out of the way he's been, but clearly not. You know, he's got to keep that life going, and it's like he can't do anything else. It's his whole way of life. But there's some sense that had things been different, she might have saved him, as it were. And then there's this really intense period of going to other places in this book, like going to Greece, going to then back to London, going onto this Greek island, to the mainland of Greece, pretending to be someone else again for Tom. There's obviously other crimes that have happened in the past. That's from the first book. They're hinted at, or more than hinted at in this book. If I do read another book, which I may well do, if I come across one, I may well do it. I'd go back to the first in the series. I'd go back to The Talented Mr. Ripley. Coming to the end quite soon. But there's obviously crimes that have happened before, and they add further threat to Tom in this book. They've not gone away. You know, the past is coming back to haunt him. It's fascinating that it's been 15 years. I don't know if there's 15 years in terms of the character. I don't think there would have been, no, because he's still quite young in this. But there's 15 years between the first and second books being written, but I don't think there's 15 years. So I get a sense that perhaps this was set in the 60s then, maybe the mid-60s or early 60s, although it's written in the copyright's from 1970. Cynthia, there's a lady called Cynthia who was Bernard's love interest. She knows about these forgeries, but she's keeping quiet about it. This character of Derwatt, I don't know if he appears in the first book, but he's the original artist who's allegedly died off a Greek island. But I don't know if he's in the original book. I'll find that out, I guess, if I read it. Right. I finished this book reading it on a train, actually, in quite a long train journey. It's funny because the first novel that Patricia Highsmith wrote was called Strangers on a Train. I've not read that. I think she must have written that in the early 50s, I think, because she had quite a long period of writing, like 40 years, I think, from perhaps the early 50s to early 90s, something around then. So Strangers on the Train is not one of the 5 Ripley books, but it was made into a film, and I think I started watching an adaptation of that, and I might go back to that. I think it was a big success for her, I believe, and it was, as I say, it was adapted into a successful film. I mean, Eloise is aware of what kind of person he is, but kind of Tom Ripley calls her amoral at different times, but there's a limit to what she would want to know, but I think she knows perhaps more than he kind of knows she knows, and that she's kind of okay with it. And obviously that forms part of her attraction for him, seemingly, that he's dangerous and mysterious, and her life is interesting or unpredictable, and things can happen. So she's kind of interesting in that way. I'm getting near the end now. there's just a constant stream of people revisiting him in France. It's crazy. He's rarely alone, you know. Tom Ripley is always having to deal with people, but his audacity allows him to get away with it, the brazenness. He's not without nerves, but he masters those nerves. He believes in his own abilities. And it's kind of tightrope walking. So I said about spinning plates, but it's also like tightrope walking. That's part of the thrill. It exhausts him. He's often suddenly exhausted by it, but then he rejuvenates. Hotels all the way through, expensive hotels, but then there's this cheap one that Bernard goes to in Salzburg. So in the last part of the book, as I said, Athens, Greek island, London, Paris, back to Bel-Ombre in this little town, little village outside Paris. Other spots in the French countryside, Salzburg, walking all around there. So much going on there. That's where the kind of denouement of the novel takes place in Salzburg, where it all comes together. I had this idea that it's a bit fanciful maybe, that Ripley's kind of an artist of crime, but sort of a forging artist of crime. I mean, not an artist in a good way, but he's a constructor of crime, almost like turns crime into a very dark art form. Maybe that's not appropriate to say that. Is it an art? I don't. Anyway, he's a complicated character. I thought the book was, and it kind of ends on a kind of note where you're just about to pick up a telephone. And he has this moment of doubt, but it's a second. But it seems within that doubt is his downfall. Oh God, I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I'll cut this bit out. But anyway, he has a moment of doubt. I'll leave it there. I won't say any more about that. There are 5 Ripley books. Some people call it the Ripleyad, written between 1955 and 1991. So it's a 36-year period. Patricia Highsmith's writing these. This one's, as I say, the second in the series. I'll go back to the first one if I do read another one. The other night, I briefly tried to watch a film adaptation of this, 2005 film adaptation of this. Well, it said it was based on it. It was horrific. I watched it. It was horrible in every regard. I had to stop watching it. Then I also tried a BBC radio adaptation, which truncates this book into an hour play. I couldn't listen to that. I listened to quite a bit of it, and it was just, I couldn't stand it. Anyway, that's that. But I do want to, I'd like to watch the film with Matt Damon. It's supposedly really good, from 1999, but I wouldn't watch that unless I've read the first book. I'd read the first book and then watch that adaptation. I think I'm gonna, because this is so long, this video now, I'm gonna miss out reading the bit I did, but as has been clear, he's got quite a complex relationship with Eloise, and she's a complicated person herself morally, that I think she's aware that he's been up to no good in all kinds of ways, and well, she's kind of aware that, yeah, I won't go any further, but she's aware of his dark side and seems to accept it. It doesn't trouble her morally. Right. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the first book, because I haven't read the first book. I'm wondering whether in that, the origins of him, there's more clues as to why he is like he is. What makes a psychopath? Is he made? Is he born as he or she born as a psychopath? Something to do with his upbringing? Are there other motivations, disappointments, bitternesses that he's undergone in life? You know, he obviously feels he deserves the good life, but without gaining it in a non-criminal way. I've noted that Ripley's been played variously by Alain Delon in an early French film. That might be something to look at eventually. Dennis Hopper in a film by Wim Wenders based on one of the books. Matt Damon, obviously, in the 1999 film. Barry Pepper in this 2005 film that I just thought was terrible. And I thought, oh God, obviously that was made after Patricia Highsmith had died. I would imagine she would have thought that was horrific. And apparently John Malkovich has played him as well. And apparently there's a Netflix series, I don't have Netflix, but there's a Netflix series with possibly, I don't know, but eliding all the 5 stories together in a row, probably to make this series, with an actor called Andrew Scott, who I don't know, playing Ripley in that. And I think that's the end of it. I was going to read a section, but it's become very long, this video. But maybe that's a testimony to how that it was an interesting book. And I think she's a very good writer, was a very good writer. And I think I probably would give another book of hers a go, probably The Talented Mr. Ripley, or maybe Strangers on a Train, or both eventually. And obviously an interesting person. I might eventually listen to a few more interviews with her, but I'm not sure, because I don't want to find out too much about writers, but just little bits. The fact that she had snails as pets was kind of a cute thing, and I'll leave it there. And thanks very much for listening if you have, and take care. So that's Patricia Highsmith, Ripley Underwater. Sorry, not Ripley Underwater. That's the final. Oh God, what a way to end it. That's the final book in the 5 books. This is called Ripley Underground. Just make sure I said Ripley Underground, not Ripley Underwater. Ripley Underwater is the very final one, which was written in the 90s. And so it's extraordinary that she's kept that character alive through 5 books across 36 years they span. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.